This Canadian couple is a living proof that you can fire with your partner or your spouse. They quit their engineering jobs and retired at the ages of 31 to travel the world, and so far they have visited over 30 countries on a completely low budget. They told us about all their fire struggles, gave practical tips and hacks for a successful fire life. And today we have Firecrackers today on the show. So welcome, Kristy and Bryce.
Thanks.
Hi, it's great to be here.
This is quite exciting for me because you both decided to retire at an age most people only daydream of. What was your moment of realization that you needed to fire?
Well, for me particularly, it was pretty hard living in Toronto and not falling for the fear of missing out in the expensive houses that everybody seems to be getting into. So my wake-up call moment was that. So initially we were actually part of that call to buy a house and follow the normal route, pay off your massive mortgage, work until you're 65, get a pension, and do what everyone else is doing. Except the problem was buying a house was like a goalpost that just kept moving. Like it didn't matter how much money you saved. As soon as you saved that money, the housing price would go up. And then, every time we went to an open house, it was like massive bidding war. And there was no say you had no say as a consumer in terms of like what you wanted in the house. It was just like, you better take this now or somebody else is going to take it. So it really felt like a Ponzi scheme. And I couldn't really stand that pressure. And then I realized the moment that we needed to do something different was that one of my coworkers at work, he was actually my mentor and we were quite close. He had been working crazy hours, like just 14-hour days, end to end for years. And then one day I heard that he collapsed at his desk and then they had to take him away in an ambulance. We later found out that if it had been half an hour later, he would have died. And like, this is the kind of toll that stress has on your life. And this is what happens when everybody gets into that frenzy of having to pay their mortgage and, never being able to stop and breathe and what is enough, right? So at that point I realized, okay, I don't want this to happen to me. I don't want to stretch and buy a really expensive house, pay off my mortgage, and then have a heart attack and die on my desk. Like, what is the point of living? I don't want to walk off this earth. And that's the only thing that I'm really striving for. And that's when like a turning point happened in which I realized we need to find a way out. Like we need to find out what is our stopping point, how much is enough, and let's get our finances together and let's figure out a way to get out of this.
Yeah, there are certain things worth sacrificing your life over. A mortgage is not one of them.
Nope. Yeah.
So did you decide to fire as a couple or individually?
At the time, we had money that we were saving up towards a house. And then at that point, I was like, okay, let's switch gears. Instead of going down that path where everybody else is fighting and going through and getting all stressed, let's change direction. And then we moved that money into investments. And that's when we decided, okay, let's figure out our 4% by the 4% rule. Let's figure out our number. Okay, if we have $1 million, it'll support $40,000 of passive income expenses per year, which is kind of how much we were spending anyway. Let's do that instead. And then the second I made that move, that was like the first time I could actually go to sleep at night without having a panic attack. Like that was the point at which I was like, okay, I know there's a way out. I know that there's a solution, and I won't have to do this anymore in a couple of years.
You no longer have to survive from salary to salary, which is a great feeling. Now, how low is your spending limit now after you fired? And does that include taxes and healthcare?
So what happened after we left? So we added up our living expenses when we were working, and we realized it was around $40,000. So that's kind of where all the math came from. So in the first year after we left, we decided to do a 1-year trip around the world because we had never done that before. We had never done that backpacking across Europe thing that everyone likes to do. So we wanted to do that. So we set aside, about $75,000 to do that. And we did our trip around the world. We were all across Europe, across Southeast Asia, Japan, and then like back again, and then all across the US. And then at the end of that year, when we came back to our home in Toronto and we sat down and added up all the money that we had spent, we realized it was about $40,000. So we were just kind of like, well, wait, does that mean we can just do this forever? And then we kind of look at each other and be like, yeah, I think it does.
Yeah.
So what was really shocking about that, I didn't even think that was going to happen, is that because the cost of living all across the world varies so much, like if you were to spend a month in London or in the UK somewhere versus spending a month in Eastern Europe or Poland or Portugal or or Southeast Asia, where the cost of living is especially when you convert it back to your home currency, it drops precipitously. If you just design your travel schedule so that you weigh the expensive places like Switzerland and the UK with cheaper places like Eastern Europe, Portugal, Southeast Asia, and places like that, you can actually kind of design your budget, your spending, so to be a lot lower than you think it is, right? So, and that's kind of what we naturally did, and we realized, oh, gee, it's a lot easier to live outside, like anywhere else in the world besides just a high-cost city. People living in, a city like Toronto or New York or LA think that their crazy living expenses is what it costs to live everywhere, and it turns out it's completely not true. So that was when there's this another light bulb clicked on, where it's just kind of like, not only can we can retire and travel the world forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to give you an example, like we're currently staying in this brand new condo apartment in Riga, and it's only costing us the equivalent of $30 a day. So, and it's just really simple. Life is really simple when you get out of that bubble and you travel the world to see what can be accomplished, rather than like, I have to stay in a high cost city and I have to get that fancy condo and I have to pay the mortgage like everyone else. So it really completely changed our minds. One of the things that our readers like to ask about a lot is health insurance, especially those people who are from the States. So what we realized is that, because in Canada, we do have health insurance. However, once you are gone from the country long enough, you become more of an expat and you're just there for your residency is with Canada, but you don't have health insurance anymore. So what we did was we bought expat insurance. And when we actually compared that with the cost of insurance in US, it was actually astounding, because for the two of us, I think it was around $60 a month.
Yeah,
to cover like $500,000 of medical expenses. It covers up to that much. Yeah. And then you have the ability to choose like what your coverage is. So it really is not that expensive outside the States. Like nobody else, any other readers internationally asks us about the cost of healthcare other than Americans. We went to see a doctor in Thailand, and he just waived the fee because it was just like a rash that Bryce had. And he's like, yeah, just give me a good review and it's okay. It only took me 10 minutes. I'm happy to help. And that was it.
The idea of like, oh my God, insurance costs like, $12,000 a month or like whatever. And then when I go to the hospital, it costs me like $500,000. That's a uniquely American thing. And that's because their system is so incredibly expensive. It's kind of interesting when you look at the expat insurance providers, because they provide insurance all over the world, and expat insurance, for readers or viewers of you who aren't familiar, is meant for people who are immigrating into a new country but aren't covered by that country's health insurance program yet, so they have to pay for everything themselves. And in the expat insurance world, there's two zones in the entire world. One is the US, and the other is the world minus the US. So the Americans pay a certain amount, a much higher amount, and everybody else pays a much, much, much lower amount. So it's like if you live in any other country besides the US, health insurance is trivial. It's trivially cheap.
A lot of people think it is quite expensive to travel the world or travel at all, but you have sort of proven that this is not the case.
Even we thought it was going to cost a lot of money to travel the world, because we are all kind of indoctrinated into thinking about costs when you're working full time and you're just paying for vacation packages, right? Which is basically, they're selling you convenience. Just turn off your brain, buy this package, and you're all of a sudden spending 10 times how much you would normally spend if you went and traveled the world yourself.
Let me give you an example. After we retired, the portfolio is actually, it has a certain dividend yield from it, because companies pay dividends, bonds pay interest. So there's a certain amount of money that the portfolio just makes, whether the stock market goes up or down. So a yield on a $1 million portfolio, the way that we structured it, was about 3%. So it was yielding about $30,000 per year, even without selling anything. When we were living in Thailand, we calculated the cost of living in Thailand to be about $20,000 a year. So while we were living in Thailand and sitting on a beach, we were making money.
So you're being paid to travel the world,
we were being
really.
paid to lie on a beach. I was just kind of like, holy crap, this is...
Why didn't I do this earlier, right?
Yeah, it feels like you're hacking life.
Yeah, it's just kind of like...
It's a chess game that you win.
We were just kind of like, well, we were just joking. We were like, well, I just made $100 by drinking this beer. It's just kind of like, oh my God, this is so easy. It's like, oh my God, life is so much easier if you
If you
get
just
out there and travel.
if you just get out of the United States or Canada, it's just much
Canada,
way
yeah,
easier.
just get out of your comfort zone and look
Yeah.
to see what other ways there are to accomplish things like this, right? And it's not just about do what everyone else is doing, because normal in equals normal out.
Yeah.
Earlier on, you mentioned how your wake-up call to FIRE came right after your colleague almost lost his life while working for someone else, and you thought, well, that could have been us. It is quite a coincidence because from a recent Reddit thread on FIRE, people said they feared divorce, death, or even future inflation after firing. So I'm wondering now, did you have similar fears?
Oh yeah, definitely. I had, this is something we discussed in like our financial retreats called Chautauqua, which happens, it's happening in Greece in a couple days. And the thing that people have in common before they quit their job is what Money Mustache decided to coin this called the wall of fear, right? Because well, number one, you're not just quitting your job. Like you're losing your identity. It's an identity that you've had for the last decade or so. You're losing what you feel like is your sense of community, because those are the same people you see every day when you went to your work, right? And you're kind of fearing like the fear of running out of money. Like what if something's going to happen down the road 50 years from now, 30 years from now, and then what do I do? So, okay, so as engineers, we make decisions based on logic and we don't make decisions based on emotion. The emotions will come and you can't deny them. You have to feel that fear. But the point of life is not to like never do anything because everything could ever go wrong. Never leave my house because, I could get killed by an asteroid. That could happen. I could get hit by a car tomorrow. It could happen. So what we do as engineers is we simply analyze the situation. For every single risk that we have a mitigation plan for that risk to make sure that we have, all our T's crossed and all our I's dotted. So for example, one of the reasons people are afraid is, like you said, what happens if I run out of money? Let's say like the stock market crashes or something like that, right? So one of the things we want to do is have a three-prong approach in case that happens. So number one, we have the yield shield, as Bryce was saying, which is even if the capital value of your portfolio goes down, you're still being paid dividends and fixed income. So even if your portfolio is dropping, you're still getting paid a certain amount of money to live on. And that's something that helps you sleep at night because you don't have to sell any assets and deplete your portfolio. And number two, we like to have a cash cushion of around 3 to 5 years of expenses. That in case anything happens with the dividends, in case we need extra money, we have cash sitting outside of the market that we can use for emergencies. And then number three is geographic arbitrage, as Bryce mentioned again. If we were getting paid, even if the stock market was dropping and we were being paid the dividend while we are living in Thailand, we're making money in a recession as the stock market is plummeting. So when you have a three-pronged plan, you kind of have that, like airlines have this as well. Like they have multiple lines of backup plans so that if one falls, then you go to the next backup plan. If that doesn't work, then you go to the next backup plan, right? So that gave me a lot of reinsurance when I was really terrified from quitting my job, despite the fact that I didn't even like my job. It was really hard to let go. So that helped my peace of mind in terms of running out of cash. Another thing to address, okay, so some people say like, what happens if you get divorced, right? So if you think that your relationship is not that stable and you will get divorced, it's probably better to actually plan that to happen before you actually become FI, right? Because at that point you would need to split your finances and be able to live on your portion of the portfolio. So that's something that you need to plan on. And if you want to work longer to mitigate for that you can actually survive on your own amount of income, you can do that as well. And then the other thing that people are afraid of is inflation, right? They said, okay, well, have you thought about inflation? What's going to happen with that? Okay, so number one, because we have equities in our portfolio, that is a natural hedge against inflation, because as prices go up, companies raise the prices on their products, right? In which case they pass that back to their shareholders. So you will see that increase in inflation as well in your equities going up. On top of that, we also use geographic arbitrage. That is actually a really good hedge against inflation because you're not fixed to an expensive city for your job. You have the ability to relocate to wherever it makes sense for you to decrease the cost of living. And because we're actually nomadic, going to places like Portugal, going to places like Thailand, it really decreases your cost of living. So it's kind of like this weird life hack that you can do to figure out how do I actually hedge for those events. So I would say, to summarize, it's absolutely normal to have fear. Like, I was terrified to quit my job. When I gave my notice, I was like having heart palpitations. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I've had this job for the last decade. What if all these horrible things happen? But what I realized is that it's not, like, it doesn't make sense to let fear control your life and never do anything because of the fear. You need to have mitigation plans. Like, think like an engineer, figure out what the risks are and have a mitigation plan for every single one of those risks. That's like your golden parachute, right? That's like, you got to bring, you can go skydiving, but make sure you bring your parachute. So that's how we deal with fear.
Kristy, like you said, buying a house can be quite a hassle, and you sort of preach against buying a house and getting a mortgage. Why is this?
So we're not preaching against buying a house, period. We're preaching against buying a house irresponsibly. Like, you got to do the math and you got to figure out whether it makes sense. Like, as we say, math shit up on the blog, right? Because it makes sense to actually, again, thinking like an engineer, it makes sense to look at how much it's going to cost you to rent something in that city versus doing the math to calculate how much it's going to cost you for the house. And what a lot of people didn't understand is that they just took the banking calculator from the sites who was offering them a mortgage and saying, oh yeah, well, the mortgage is, the same as rent, I'm done. No, when you buy a house, there's actually a lot of extra costs that come up that could inflate the cost of that by another 50%. Like, you have to pay property taxes, you have to pay maintenance, you have to pay insurance to insure your house. There's like closing costs as well when you sell. There's like lawyers costs when you actually finish signing your forms. There's a lot of additional costs that people don't consider with home ownership that they need to be able to do the math to figure it out, right? I mean, if I go to a city and I can buy a house for $100,000 and the rent there is like $1,000, yeah, if I do the math, it makes sense for me to buy the house, and I would buy the house. So it really is about being responsible and actually doing the math. But what I was seeing from where I was living was a lot of emotional decisions made on the house. Like, I must have this house. I don't care how much it costs. Like, I love that balcony and I must have it. That is when you get taken care of. You can get taken care of. You get taken advantage of very easily when that happens, because whoever's the salesperson, whoever's the real estate agent sees you and it's like, oh, that person, will pay whatever it is to get this house, and then you're making decisions based on emotion. That's when you get taken advantage of. And I did not want that to happen to us.
Yeah, the really dangerous thing about housing as an asset class is that it has a strange sense of safety, because it's just part of being an adult.
Like, safe as houses is what they like to say.
I mean, that's a term.
Mm-hmm.
The strange thing is that if people don't understand the stock market, they tend not to go and invest money in the stock market. Right. They tend not to put their life savings into a stock market because they're like, I don't know how it works, so But if people don't understand how housing works, it just, for some reason, just makes them kind of go, put all the money into the house. It has this false sense of safety. And when I talk to people who have gone into this and are convinced that their house is like the best purchase ever, because it's a real tangible asset and this kind of stuff, and I start asking them how much are property taxes, how much is this and that, and they just don't know. And it more often than not, actually, the vast majority of people who own houses don't know how to analyze whether that was a good decision or not. They just bought it because everyone else is buying it. That's what makes housing such a dangerous asset class. It feels safe, but it's actually dangerous, while stocks feel dangerous, but it's actually a lot safer to invest in if you do it properly.
You talked about the fears you had before firing and how you sort of overcame those fears. Now, how about the fears you have right now, or have you run into any unforeseen circumstances that you weren't quite prepared for?
Well, we realized that traveling the world was less expensive than we thought it was, and we could do that forever. So that was unexpected. That was a positive expense.
Yeah.
That was a positive surprise.
Yeah. The negative is, so at one point while we were traveling, his grandmother passed away, which is something that's completely unexpected. So that's one downside when you're traveling, that you have to get back home like really quickly when you're expecting something that is happening. But luckily we had purchased travel insurance, which is why I stress the importance of having insurance, like health insurance and travel insurance, because we had to cancel a lot of Airbnbs and we had to cancel flights in order to get back. And because we had bought travel insurance from World Nomads, they actually covered all the cost. So we would have been out of pocket for $3,000, but because we bought the travel insurance and it was included in our $40,000 budget for the year, we didn't have to pay anything. So it is another example of like planning for things that could go wrong and then having that backup plan kick in. So that's one thing that we weren't expecting. And then we were lucky that we had researched the company for the travel insurance and they took care of everything. So
yeah.
You're one of those people who have succeeded in sort of hacking life and discovering how to save money. Can you share your top 3 saving strategies?
I think what helped us is having the sharing economy on our side. So the fact that we have things like Airbnb, we have things like auto share, we have the ability to actually not have to own specific things, because whenever you own something, there's always additional costs that come with it, right? Our friends who had owned cars in Toronto, like their cars were always breaking down. They were always getting unexpected expenses out of the blue. We just took subways, and whenever we needed a car to go somewhere or pick up groceries, we signed up for a service called auto share, which allows you to go to a nearby lot, pick up a car for like you sign it out for 2 hours and then you return it. That ended up saving us a ton of money because we only had to pay maybe like, what is it? Like $20 to $40 a month, for the sharing costs. Yeah, it was very inexpensive and insurance was included. And we didn't really need a car that often because we were walking and biking and taking subway more often than not. So that's one option. Airbnb is helping us a lot because in addition to the fact that it's less expensive than hotels, you can actually cook your own food and you can actually do your own laundry. So then you don't have to end up with a lot of costs of eating out when you're staying in hotels. You don't have to get your clothes dry clean. You just have laundry and you can just do your clothes as if you wash your clothes like you are at home. So I think sharing economy, take advantage of the sharing economy. It's better for the environment because we don't have to, buy a lot of things and throw them out. We can share a car, we can share a place. And it's, it really helps you in terms of expenses, like saving money. And it actually helps you meet a lot of new people, which I find is really cool because a lot of our really good travel tips have come from Airbnb hosts. And we never would have found those local tips out by ourselves.
We talk a lot about on the blog about like the additional cost of ownership. So it's like, we advocate that you own as little as possible and rent as much as possible, because when you rent things like either by like a car or time or a place, you only pay for as much as you need it. You only pay for as much time as you need on that thing, and then you let someone else use it, right? When you own it, you take on all the additional costs for that. So that's a big part of it, and as well, travel the world, because apparently that can save you money. And
shocking, yeah.
That was the biggest one for me.
Yeah,
that was the biggest and most surprising one for me. That travel was actually a cost-saving measure rather than a costing measure.
Yeah.
About FIRE, it's quite easy to say, I'm going to FIRE when you earn about $50,000 or more annually. But how about a person who earns about $20,000 as an annual income? How can that person benefit from FIRE?
Okay, so that we can answer that question in 2 ways. Number one is to give you an example of one of our readers. He was very, very frustrated because he was selling cars in Canada and he was making very little money, like barely enough to meet his expenses, and he was getting very frustrated. So what he ended up doing was he actually moved to South Korea to teach English. And despite the fact that his salary didn't go up that much, like he's earning $30,000 a year, but the taxes in Korea is very low. It's at like 3% tax, and some of his expenses were covered. So as a result of that change, he ended up being able to save 67% of his salary. And so by the 4% rule, and if you look at the charts of your savings rate versus your time to FIRE, his time to financial independence is actually about 12 to 15 years. So as a result of that change. And he said that he's a lot less stressed. He has more time to travel. He's learning about new cultures. So one of the things that people have known to have done now, especially with our generation, is like use geographic arbitrage, use the internet, use the ability to earn money in a country in which the currency is very strong, and then live in a country in which the currency is weak, or take advantage of the fact that some of your costs would be covered by these teaching positions and different types of positions. Another thing that we realized is that you don't have to be completely financially independent to reduce the amount of stress in your life. Like this is what we like to call the FU money, because like once you have enough money saved up that you don't have to worry about it, you are no longer your boss's bitch. Like you are no longer being forced to do something. You can actually make choices. So an example, one of our favorite bloggers, JL Collins, he used to, when he was working, I think at a restaurant, and he wanted to take some time off to go to Europe, he just had $5,000 saved up, but that was enough to cover his expenses for a certain period of time. And when his boss said, no, you can't take that time off, we refuse to let you, he was totally willing to walk away from that job and get another job. Because he had enough FU money that he wasn't stressed out, he wasn't living paycheck to paycheck, and eventually his bosses actually approved for him to go traveling. So it really is not 100% about retiring early. That could be your goal, or it could just be reducing your stress by having enough FU money. And for some people, they even do something we like to call partial FI, which means you are changing careers, or you're downgrading your job to like part-time instead of full-time. And if you, let's say you have like $200,000 saved or something, and it's throwing out an income of like $8,000, but you're working part-time, and maybe your expenses is just, you can reduce your income from work to do something that's making you like maybe $20,000 a year or $30,000 a year, because the passive income from your portfolio is helping your living expenses. You can reduce the amount of stress and then continue working, but maybe at a less stressful job, or even working part-time, or even taking mini retirements, because the power of money is that it gives you options. Like if you have any money at all saved up and you have an emergency fund, or you have enough FU money that you are not beholden to your employer, it makes a world of difference. So it really isn't, FIRE isn't just about retiring early. That's like the optional part of FIRE, but the financial independence and the FU money is what gives you peace of mind and gives you choices. So I would say that it's much easier to save if you have a higher salary, but it's definitely not a prerequisite. And our readers have found very creative ways to save enough FU money or to become partially FI that has reduced their stress significantly from what they were doing before they learned how to manage their finances.
I have to say, you have such an impressive investment portfolio. Now, how about cryptocurrencies? How do you feel about them? Because a lot of young people right now are looking to it as a get-rich-quick sort of investment strategy.
Okay, so I looked into cryptocurrency because I was interested in this stuff like earlier this year, how all this stuff works. I knew about the volatility. I knew about how much it's like the price value swings around so much. So from a perspective of making money, I don't think it's a great way of doing it. What struck me the most about cryptocurrency is how dangerous it is. Like how easy it is to steal your money if you put a significant portion of your money into cryptocurrency. Because like over the last year, the amount of like theft and crime in the crypto world has just been like insane. Like we actually know somebody who invested in crypto and then had a hacker hack into his account and then steal over 100 grand of crypto. And then once it's been stolen, there's just no recourse. Like you can't do anything about it. He went to the FBI, and the FBI was like, whatever. And people keep saying that crypto is secure because of the fact that the blockchain is distributed and it can't be hacked. But it's actually a double-edged sword. The fact that there's no bank involved in a transaction means that the onus of keeping your crypto secure goes from the bank, who has the money to hire security people and actually make that secure. And the onus of security now goes down to the user. So the user has to know how to store their crypto securely, and most of them don't. If you don't know, if people don't know the difference between a hot wallet and a cold wallet, or they don't know why it's a bad idea to keep your crypto in an exchange, or why it's a bad idea, or they just keep their crypto on their phone or on their laptop, they have no business doing anything with crypto. If they don't know how to set up a cold storage wallet and keep that thing secure from hackers, they have no business being in crypto. Because learning how my friend got all of his crypto stolen from him, I realized, like, we kind of reverse engineered how that hack happened, and then I kind of realized, oh, that is actually really easy to do, and I could probably use that to steal any like crypto from anyone that I wanted to. I'm not going to, but I don't think people realize how insecure. Yeah, I don't think people realize how insecure crypto is. They think it's secure because of that blockchain, all that kind of stuff. But if you do something very innocuous, like install a wallet on your phone, I can steal it. I could probably steal it, and that's like, I don't think people understand how dangerous that is. So I never advocate for people to touch this stuff unless they really, really know what they're doing, and most of them don't, unfortunately.
For our viewers out there who want to FIRE or who are ready, starting on their journey to FIRE, what is your advice for them? What sort of books should they read? The things to avoid, while thinking of FIREing?
Yeah, sure. So to answer exactly that question of how do you go about investing in this kind of stuff, we created something called, so on our site, millennial-revolution.com, we created something called an investment workshop, which is it's a completely free resource. It's a step-by-step guide on how to open up a brokerage account, how to design a portfolio, which index ETFs to buy, and how to rebalance your portfolio, and how to do all this, how to make it tax efficient, and how to do all this kind of stuff. So it's a 1-year course, so a series of 52 articles that we created like a year ago, and so we would recommend people start with that, because learning how to invest safely in the stock market is probably the thing that scares people the most. Mm-hmm. And the reason why people just kind of go, I don't understand, I'm just going to go buy a house instead. So that's the resource that I would start with. Specific screenshots that I took are based off of U.S. and Canadian brokerage accounts, but the concepts can be applied anywhere. I mean, like as long as whatever country you're in, you have access to the stock market. So however you would, for example, buy 1 share of Apple, however you do, as long as you can buy 1 share of Apple, you can do everything that we teach.
Yeah, so the steps are generic and comply to everyone. So you just match that and mirror it with your country's version of that ETF.
Yeah, but I don't, for example, I can't open up a brokerage account in South Africa because I don't.
And what sort of books do you recommend?
Books, yeah. So definitely J.L. Collins, The Simple Path to Wealth. I find that he's very good in explaining the concepts simply and breaking it down so you understand it. And he wrote the book to really help his daughter understand finances. So that there's he's willing to use it for his daughter, it actually works, and his heart is really in it. So A Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins.
And we're writing a book that is going to get published next year called Quit Like a Millionaire. So that's something to look forward to as well.
Guys, as soon as the book is published, I'll make sure the link is shared under this interview. So go ahead and subscribe to our channel so you can get updated. And now, just out of sheer curiosity, since you have visited about 30 countries so far, which is your favorite country and why?
Okay, so we have traveled to over 30 countries by now. I would say I like different countries for different reasons. In terms of my absolute favorite,
be careful now which country you mentioned. Like, oh, she's not like our country.
Yes, gotta sidestep that one. So I think, I could say I like every single country equally. There are some that I absolutely just really memorable and sticks out in my head, and Thailand is one of them. And I was very surprised that Thailand was one of them, because I originally was very hesitant to go to Thailand because I had read about the bombing and in Bangkok, and then that was the same year that we were planning to go to Thailand. It had only happened a couple months ago. But the main reason why we ended up going was we wanted to meet our blogger friends online, and they happened to be in Chiang Mai. And I'm so glad I didn't listen to the scary newspaper articles. That's another thing about traveling. Don't read newspaper articles. It's just really for shock value. It doesn't represent the country at all. So when we went to Thailand, I absolutely fell in love with Chiang Mai. It just felt like home. Everybody was so friendly. They even had this, they had all sorts of expats who were starting companies there. So you really get that kind of sense of community. And somebody offered me a job while I was getting my haircut because I told them that I was a computer engineer. So it really is this amazing place with a lot of people that are super curious, willing to start companies, and then is very comfortable. And you get a massage for $12 US.
Oh, I'll go for the massage.
Yeah. Yeah. So highly recommend Thailand. I think you have a favorite too. What's your favorite?
I liked Portugal actually a lot. There was something about the people, the food, the wine, port wine that you could get for €5 or whatever. I really liked the Portuguese kind of lifestyle and just and Eastern Europe as well. I was surprised by how much I liked Poland, the Baltic nations. Maybe I'll come to Ukraine one of these days.
Hopefully.
But yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool here, and a lot of people don't know much about the Baltics, so I had no expectations coming in as well, and it really was a pleasant surprise, especially Latvia, Estonia as well. They were really cool places to spend time in, and I could probably see myself spending more time there too later on.
Thank you again, Kristy and Bryce, for taking the time to join me today for a wonderful interview.
All right, thank you.
So firecrackers are really out here cracking the code for financial independence and early retirement. And the world is listening to what they have to say because they have been featured on CBC News, CNBC, Yahoo Finance, Business Insider, and just to name a few. So check out your blog, millennialrevolution.com, for more about their FIRE journey. And also like this video and subscribe for more.